30 years had passed, decades without rain. The once fertile plains of Fars had become as barren as the Lut-Salt Desert. A few arrow shots from Persepolis, the Kushans, bloodthirsty warriors from the east, were attacking Persia. Persian soldiers defended the land, no matter the cost. Ardashir resisted heroically, but his men fell one by one. Anahita summoned her remaining strength in battle. For Yuvishka, the Kushan general, victory was certain. Until history took a different turn. The 7 immortals were the best warriors in the kingdom. One of them would become a legend.
Hello again and welcome to another dive into the world of Prince of Persia. If you haven't watched my previous video, I recommend checking it out, especially the last part where I discuss why the Lost Crown might not fit the classic Prince of Persia mold. Let's review what defines a Prince of Persia game. It's an intricate platforming, challenging combat system, integration of time in gameplay or story, an alternate version of the protagonist such as a shadow or wraith, and deadly or near-fatal traps. Sadly, after examining these elements and playing the first release of The Lost Crown, I have to admit, yes, it is indeed a Prince of Persia game. Despite my initial skepticism, it holds true to the series' core characteristics, even more so than Prince of Persia from 2008. In this video, I'll explore what makes The Lost Crown a true Prince of Persia game, and share my thoughts on it beyond its series legacy. I'll keep it concise, so thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. First of all, the platforming. Although it is not the same precise platforming as the first trilogy with its cinematic style, it also departs from the second trilogy, The Sands of Time. It falls somewhere in between. Originally described as a Metroidvania, the platforming here is more accessible, but not necessarily easy. It's not as difficult or detailed as previous games, and doesn't require a high level of skill to navigate, but it is still quite fun. While the platforming is less cinematic, it remains an important aspect of the game. Another element often associated with Metroidvania is the leveling system. However, in The Lost Crown, there is no traditional leveling system. There are no light shows indicating level ups or stat improvements. You do acquire better weapons and equipment, but improving your skills as a player is crucial, which aligns with the previous Prince of Persia games. You need to master new equipment and skills to navigate the game and defeat enemies, leading us to combat. I initially thought the combat would be mindless button mashing, but I was wrong. Each new enemy presents a significant threat, requiring you to strategize rather than rush in blindly. As you progress to new areas, you encounter more resilient enemies. While upgrading your weapons gives you an advantage, honing your skills is equally important for success in battles. Then we have the boss battles, which are another significant element in The Lost Crown. While bosses existed in the Sands of Time trilogy, they combine platforming and skill management. Here, they're transformed into flashy anime-like encounters filled with lights, special moves, and intricate parrying and dodging mechanics. These bosses are very challenging, primarily due to the complexity and number of steps required to defeat them. Failing one step often means restarting from a checkpoint, and slogging back, only to face the boss's multi-phase attack patterns again. Let's move on to traps. Initially, I was disappointed by the traps in the Lost Crown, but they do exist. Traps are now simple obstacles during area navigation, some minor nuisances, while others are more challenging. However, the trap rooms are far more interesting. They're filled with traps that guard special items. Getting caught in a trap resets your progress to the beginning of the room and deals significant damage, with repeated failures leading to death. Thus, traps do present substantial challenges, though they are mostly optional. For another very important element, time. In my opinion, the most crucial aspect of a Prince of Persia game is time, and the Lost Crown handles it masterfully. In the first trilogy, time was a limitation, driving you to achieve your goals quickly. In the second trilogy, time became a tool for the player, as well as part of the plot. Here, time is even more central than in Sands of Time. The entire plot and mini-game mechanics revolve around time, keeping you engaged and constantly guessing, puzzling, and trying to understand the unfolding story. And lastly, the shade, the shadow, the mirror image, the soul. Some might argue that this element is absent in the Lost Crown, but they would be partially wrong. While different in nature, it is present through the mechanics of time. You encounter alternate versions of yourself around the map, and you must defeat them to claim their powers and improve your chances of success. These doppelgangers come from alternate timelines, seeking your skills to save their own worlds. But you must prevail. For one final comment about the game itself, my biggest gripe with the game was the lack of fall damage. As I mentioned in my previous video, it would have been impossible to make a Metroidvania with fall damage, which initially annoyed me. However, once I acclimated to the game's mood, mechanics, and challenges, I completely overlooked this omission. Implementing fall damage would have made the game painfully slow and unnecessarily difficult. So this decision ultimately suited the game better than the teleportation gimmick in the 2008 game. A quick note. I want to talk more about the game itself, but I have only played the initial release version. Knowing now that there is a DLC roadmap extending to the end of 2024, I'll revisit the Lost Crown once it reaches its full final version, including completed story beats. By the time I started writing this video, the roadmap had been presented, and by the time I decided to publish it, a new Prince of Persia game, the Rogue Prince of Persia, had been released in an early access form. I will eventually review that one once it's fully out. As a closer, I would like to discuss the plot of The Lost Crown and revisit a point I made in my previous video regarding one of my biggest gripes with the game, the prince himself. Be warned, from this point on, I will discuss story elements that are considered spoilers. You may want to skip ahead if you wish to avoid spoilers. You can click on the chapter in the description to jump ahead. Very well then, let's go. We play as Sargon, an immortal of the Persian kingdom. You are a fighter in the elite force, not the prince. Your mission is to rescue Prince Hassan from another villainous character. Throughout the story, much is uncovered, but you soon find out that the leader of the immortals, Varim, is the true villain, not the person that captured Prince Hassan. This revelation pulls an interesting thread, but the game intentionally hides information from the player. I understand this is to encourage players to stick with the game longer, to find the pieces to make the entire story. And that's good. However, it doesn't change my biggest issue. You are not the Prince of Persia. You never were, and you will never be. The hidden story reveals that Sargon is the son of the current queen, while Hassan is adopted. This makes most people think that Sargon is the prince, but that would be wrong as well. The queen is illegitimate. The entire plot of the game, the hidden story, reveals that Sargon is the son of the current queen, while Hassan is adopted. This maybe makes people think that Sargon is the prince, but this is wrong. The queen is illegitimate. The story beats that you uncover by playing the main plot, revolves around the fact that she usurped the throne and killed the previous king, stealing the crown. She's not the real queen. She's an usurper. And Sargon is not a real prince, nor will he be a prince. By the end of the main game, of the main story, we learn that the villain Varam is actually the son of the previous king, making him the real Prince of Persia. You end up rescuing a child version of Varam from the past through some unexplained time shenanigans, setting him up to be the prince and future king of Persia. This brings me back to my main gripe and a significant complaint. You are not the prince. You will never be the prince. In the original trilogy, you become the prince by the end of the first game. In the Sands of Time, you start as the Prince of Persia. The 2008 reboot was ambiguous, but a sequel might have addressed that. Here, not only is it addressed, but it is also confusing. Many people online argue that Sargon is the prince, but he is not. He is an abandoned child from a false queen. She is not a legitimate queen, and he is not a legitimate prince. He is an immortal. There is no Prince of Persia for you here, except the villain. For those of you who skipped ahead, let's summarize. I don't like some of the aspects of the story of the game. My final opinion is the game is good. Story's not my favorite. The presentation is a bit too over the top because it's like a very long anime. It doesn't really feel like Prince of Persia during some of the cutscenes. Sometimes there are power blasts, people flying around, leaping miles in a single bound, but that's fine. Everything else around that is Prince of Persia, so I like it fine. Everyone should play the game at least once. I cannot wait for the DLCs to be out and done with, so I can play it again in its full, completed form. All in all, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is, indeed, a Prince of Persia game. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I can make more of these in the future, maybe about another game series I love dearly. Have a nice day, and talk to you next time.
They will soon
Goodbye.
find that the kingdom's bravest warriors will be their undoing.